Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, the woman behind the popular TikTok account Appalachian Forager makes jam from wild pawpaws and jewelry from coyote teeth.
I like taking anything from the frickin' woods, bringing it home and like turning it into something beautiful, useful, because that's just how I am, you know.
A new podcast looks at coal dust exposure beyond the mines, affecting people far downstream from Appalachia.
Even if you just opened your window in your home, it was right there, black particles.
I have asthma now, and that stuff is terrible.
That dust did contribute to his emphysema.
And in some places, slavery continued in different forms well after the Civil War. A new marker in western North Carolina acknowledges that history and commemorates a disaster that killed 19 black prisoners. You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Gathering wild foods has long been a way to put food on the table in the Appalachian Mountains. But foraging can be a closely held practice. People don't like to reveal their best spots. But in recent years, the practice has gone digital, with online communities devoted to mushroom hunting and native plants. One woman in eastern Kentucky is introducing foraging to the TikTok generation through an account called Appalachian Forager. She's sharing her knowledge and skills, along with some humor. Her videos have gone viral. Folkways reporter Amanda Page has the story.
In the butt crack of that tree, that's a lion's mane.
This is Appalachian Forager.
And I'm going to have to use my hillbilly ingenuity to get it because she's high up.
It's the social media account of East Kentuckian Whitney Johnson.
You want me to get below it and try to catch it?
Yeah.
While you poke it?
Yeah.
In this Instagram reel, Whitney is cheering on her boyfriend who's attempting to knock a mushroom down from a tree with a stick.
Yes, Daddy. You know what Mommy likes in a mushroom stick? Look at that fork! Yeah.
In another more fast-paced reel, she's in her kitchen, cooking with pawpaws. She mixes the yellow pulp from this native fruit with sugar and pectin to make jam.
Arm is tired. Keep stirring. After that, remove the baby from the heat and transfer it to your Canon command station. What's on mine? It's a tea towel laid out with a dry paper towel to lay stuff on, a damp paper towel, ladle, tongs, Canon funnel, a jar grabby dooflarchy, and yes, honey, a fan because your girl runs hot. Real hot. I sterilized 13 jars in my water bag.
Appalachian Forager's videos are highly entertaining, but the account is not just for show. Because in real life, Whitney forages, cooks, and makes tinctures because it's what she loves to do. I've come to meet Whitney IRL. In real life, she uses a four-wheeler so she can cover more ground on her family's property in eastern Kentucky. It's pawpaw season, so we're headed out to find some. Whitney takes us in the direction of the Big Sandy River. We stop at a tree loaded with pawpaws.
So I'm going to stop us right here. What we're going to do first, we'll get off here. You see, look at that big cluster right there.
Oh my goodness.
But Whitney says she doesn't shake the tree or pick fruit from it. She only gathers pawpaws once they've fallen on the ground.
Like, they let you know when they're ready. So if you shake the tree, sometimes they'll come off when they're not quite ripe. And pawpaws are not ones that you can like put in your windowsill and get them to be softer. Like, they are what they are. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you shake the tree.
We could have gone foraging deeper in the woods today, but Whitney chose this section along the river for a reason.
Well, riverbanks give you different stuff than, say, the woods would. So you're going to have like different types of soil, different types of trees, different types of terrain.
She says here, by the river, she has a pretty good idea of what she'll find. Along with pawpaws, this is where she finds berries. But in the woods, she's never certain what she'll find.
It's like, honey, you don't know. Like, it can be anything. And I like that. I like to find new stuff and be surprised.
It might just be that element of surprise that makes Whitney's social media presence so appealing to her followers. Appalachian Forager started in 2020 with posts on her personal Instagram account. She grew up foraging and decided to document her outings.
I would post a picture of a mushroom and say, this is a blottodaw and you can eat it or it'll kill you or whatever.
But at first, her posts didn't really catch on.
And some of my buddies were like, TikTok, you need to get on TikTok. And I was like so anti-TikTok. But I got on there and I made like this poorly put together intro video that was like, I'm Whitney and these are things that I plan to do on my TikTok. Follow me if that tickles your pickle. And it just like, psh.
Appalachian Forager took off. She's now got more than 845,000 TikTok followers, and her Instagram account has more than 123,000 followers. But Whitney's not in it for the clicks. She's a licensed mental health therapist. She works part-time. On her days off, she says she's romping in the hills, foraging.
These go hand in hand for me because as a therapist, I preach self-care all day. You know, make sure you're doing what you love, make sure you're taking care of yourself. And I get that through my relationship with nature.
She says she doesn't force advice, but she's asked patients if they've considered going for a walk in nature or taking photos and journaling.
And I suggest that because I know how much it helps me.
She says eventually she'd like to specialize in ecotherapy, where she'd encourage patients to go out in nature to improve their mental health.
I want people to connect with Mama Nature. So like the hills and the woods are my church. And if you can connect in that way and get, you know, that serotonin boost like I do from it, do it. And, you know, it's nice to be able to go out and get some free food too. You get up.
After our time on the riverbank, we hang out on Whitney's porch and have a pawpaw tasting.
Oh, it's a good. It's a good.
Oh, wow.
Yay, nay.
I had only tried pawpaws one other time. Much better than the last one I had.
Okay.
the one that we were talking about putting in my oatmeal, it was like a vague vomit taste.
That's because it wasn't ripe, see? This is why you want them to be like almost rotten looking, because that is when they taste the best.
After we eat pawpaws, I ask her about her earrings. I've been admiring them all day. She tells me they're made with coyote teeth she found in a ditch.
I like taking anything from the frickin' woods, bringing it home and like turning it into something beautiful, useful, because that's just how I am, you know. And I think that's how I was raised. Do what you can with what you have.
That's often how her meals come together, too.
I always try to pull from, you know, old-timey, mamaw, papaw, like plate-breaking, like gut-busting foods, you know, like good garden foods, like green beans and like chicken and dumplings, just like good down-home food.
She says she incorporates foods she finds in the woods with those simple Eastern Kentucky dishes.
So it's kind of like taking the two and fusing it together because I want to stay true to that part of me because that's how I grew up. And I mean, honestly, that's my favorite food that's out there is, you know, throw some bacon grease in it and it's going to be good.
She tells me about a mountain dish she shared with her followers called killed lettuce and onions.
Killed lettuce and onions is pretty much just like wild greens or lettuce with bacon grease poured on top of it. Start out by frying you up some piggy strips. Yes, bacon, honey. We're using bacon. Get your 4 big green onions and give them a chop. And I posted that video and so many people were like, oh my God, like, I haven't had that in forever. I totally forgot that was something I loved as a kid. So I like to revive those old dishes and have people like, in this day and age, be making those old, you know, wholesome down-home meals. Once the bacon cools down enough to get my paws on it, I'm going to rip it up just like I've done with every fishing ticket that a game warden has given me.
Whitney's bringing that revival of old dishes to hundreds of thousands of followers online. Her followers ask questions in the comments and share tips they've learned from making the recipes she shares. They're doing what she's doing. She's foraging for the TikTok generation. But she says she won't be changed by social media.
I'm going to stay true to who I am. I don't plan on doing anything crazy, selling out and becoming like some crazy boss babe thing. I'm just going to stay in the holler and pick my mushrooms and make some little videos. Look at it.
We'll be here to watch them. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Amanda Page.
And like I said, this whole bowl's for me, so supper is served. And you know it's good when you stand at the kitchen counter and just devour it. Now y'all go and try this because it is so good, it'll make your tongue like...
A lot of folks are fascinated by the results of taxidermy. Whether it's a display at a park's visitor center or a big buck on a friend's wall. But we tend to be a little more squeamish about the process that goes into making these animal mounts. The preservation and mounting of dead animals has been around since at least the Middle Ages. But it didn't really become popular until the 1800s, when hunters began bringing trophies to upholstery shops. In 2023, Folkways reporter Margaret McLeod Leaf visited with one expert practitioner in Yadkin County, North Carolina.
I feel a little apprehensive as I walk up to Amy Ritchie's workshop in Hamptonville, North Carolina, especially after hearing the message on her voicemail.
Hi, you've reached Amy's Animal Art. I'm sorry you've missed me. I'm probably skinning a bobcat or sewing up the neck of a giraffe. Please leave me a message. I'll call you back as soon as I can stop and pull off the rubber gloves.
Amy is an award-winning taxidermist. Her studio is located in her 4-bay garage. It's large, bright, and airy, with about 150 deer antlers hanging from the high ceilings. Everything is neatly organized. On one side, power tools hang on a wall next to shelves filled with paints and adhesives.
Over here is the giraffe corner.
The other side of the studio is a veritable zoo. A few giraffes, lions, armadillos, bears, coyotes, suspended in motion. They seem so vital. I can't help but reach out and touch them. They feel soft and real.
I'm really passionate about taxidermy. I think at my core, I just love it. It's what I was meant to do.
Amy grew up in rural North Carolina, homeschooled by her mom. She says that gave her plenty of time to follow her interests. That included animals, particularly dead ones.
I started, when I was 13, I found a roadkill snake on the road and wanted to turn it into a belt.
It was a king snake with a white chain pattern.
I asked Mom if I could have a knife from the kitchen to skin the snake, and she said, just please wear gloves so you don't get a disease.
Amy taught herself how to skin and tan it.
I was able to find the information online, how to use glycerin and some different products from just the pharmacy to be able to tan that. And there I was, snakeskin belt.
Amy admits she was an unusual child with unusual interests.
I like being unique. I mean, why be like everyone else? And I never have been.
She says her dad also supported her interest in taxidermy. He had a second job delivering newspapers early in the morning.
And he would find all the fresh roadkills. So that's how he would bring home raccoons and possums and things for me to practice skinning.
When she was 16, Amy says her dad encouraged her to enter a national taxidermy competition. Her entry was a red squirrel mounted on a bed of leaves as if it was sleeping. Amy competed in the open division, and even though she was a novice, she walked away with third place. She's gone on to win many awards over the years. Now at 36, she's a highly skilled taxidermist in demand. She makes her living mounting animals for hunters and collectors.
We got the actual messy stuff going on. This is a wild boar. Someone brought in.
The bones and bulk of the meat have already been removed. Amy starts by preparing and tanning the hide. She grabs a knife.
We have to take this meat off, and so I'll hold the knife and work it down like this. It's fascinating and kind of satisfying to slowly shave this off.
Amy is small, just over 5 feet tall. She wraps the exposed hide tightly on the edge of her workbench and scrapes the knife along the boar's hide in rhythmic motion. At this stage, the hide is stiff and unwieldy.
It's hard. I can't even fold the hide. By the time I'm done, it'll be soft, and it will not take up as much space in my freezer.
The freezer, a part of this tour that I've been most curious about. Amy has 7 chest freezers. She opens a freezer lid, and I pull out one of about 50 gallon-sized Ziploc bags. Inside is something called a deer cape.
Yeah.
These are so compact, it's like a roast.
Yeah, it's just the skin, and it's the head and shoulders of the deer, and wrapped up really tight.
After Amy treats the hide, she crafts the animal's shape. She carves muscles, veins, and bone mass out of a foam mold, like a sculptor. She sands the mold, applies adhesives, and wraps the skin around it. Then she smooths out irregularities before sewing it up with artfully hidden stitches. She uses glass eyes.
You gotta detail the eyes so that they look realistic, so they have expression. And those are those things that separate, just a hide assembler from an artistic taxidermist.
Amy says when she was starting out, she didn't know many other women in the field. But she says that's changed in the past few years. And she's helping train a new generation through her Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Hey folks, today we're going to do a repair video. And this is going to be involving a very common problem that I see with more deer capes.
And now, through an apprenticeship.
In conjunction with this wire brush helps.
Amy is helping her first apprentice, Mariah Petrie, carve a foam mold. They'll sand and apply adhesives before pulling a deer cape onto the form. Mariah started out as a customer. She came into Amy's workshop a few years ago to drop off a deer to be mounted, and the two hit it off. Mariah says she was a little uneasy with the work at first.
Being an animal person myself, I was like, oh, my heart's going to get in the way. Will I be able to clean this cat? Because it looks like my pet cat in a way, just a little bit bigger. And you get to come to terms with things. After you do it once, it's just a motion you go through.
Now she works part-time with Amy and hopes to start her own taxidermy business. She says her favorite part is breathing life into her subjects.
I think it has been amazing how you can make a piece of foam with some clay look realistic. That is the start of everything, just taking something that looks lifeless and making it look realistic when you saw it out in the woods or a picture.
Like Mariah, most of Amy's clients are hunters who bring in deer trophies or bobcats. Amy says she rarely hunts, though she doesn't have a problem with it as long as the animals are legally obtained.
I'm here in the South where really if you haven't seen a deer head or know what taxidermy is, how are you even a Southerner?
But Amy's most prized mounts are from a trip she made to Africa. They include the head and neck of an adult giraffe looming over 10 feet tall in her studio. Hunting giraffes is controversial. Amy says this animal was an older male that was beyond breeding age and had been attacking younger giraffes. She also has a mother and baby giraffe that were donated by a zoo after they died of natural causes. Amy enjoys sharing her collection, especially with kids.
They just come in here and they're like, wow, Mom and Dad, what's that? What's that? And it really gets you more up close than you would even in most zoos. And, how many kids get to pet a baby giraffe?
Amy says she's constantly looking for new ways to expand her craft. More active poses, more detailed scenery. She says part of the pleasure for her is the transformation. Like when she turned that snakeskin she found on the side of the road into an eye-catching belt.
I think the fascination with just thinking, wow, that would have just been thrown away and I have done something with something that would have rotted. And maybe that's why I like taxidermy so much, the idea that you can make something from nothing.
For Amy, it's more than just preserving animals. She enjoys sharing this art form, whether it's with her clients or with people who just stop by to marvel at her studio. For Inside Appalachia, this is Margaret McLeod Leaf in Yadkin County, North Carolina.
Those first two stories are part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in the region. You can find dozens more Folkways stories at our website, wvpublic.org. Coming up, coal dust is more than a health problem for miners. People who live hundreds of miles downstream say they're getting sick too. You're Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, focusing on students' futures. Classes available at concord.edu/apply.
Appalachia plays an important part in the world economy. The region produces less coal than it used to, but it's still a hot commodity for steelmakers. That demand creates problems for people living near the terminals where coal is moved from train to ship to then be carried overseas. Residents of Norfolk and Newport News, Virginia say airborne coal dust from export terminals is coating their cars and houses and getting into their lungs. Residents have started to take matters into their own hands. A new podcast called Crosswinds links that fight on the coast to communities in West Virginia. It's produced by an environmental justice research project at the University of Virginia called the Repair Lab. Here's a portion of the podcast trailer.
It's just amazing because if you look at it, it's mountains and mountains and mountains of coal.
Here, coal export is a 24/7 operation that produces clouds of coal dust. Wind blows the dust into homes, cars, and gardens. People breathe it in.
The doctor was like, I hate to tell you, but that it's your neighborhood. They're not stuffy all the time for no reason. They don't have allergies, the headaches. It's coming from the coal dust.
Even if you just opened your window in your home, it was right there, black particles.
And this is what will accumulate on the side of the house.
I have asthma now. Man, that stuff is terrible.
That dust did contribute to his emphysema.
Crosswinds caught my attention because I'm always interested in how what happens in Appalachia affects communities downstream. I spoke with Crosswinds producer Adrian Wood and Nathaniel Kurtz, a pastor and activist in one of the affected communities. Nathaniel Kurtz, Adrian Wood, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia and speaking with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
So the podcast that you all are working on looks at a problem affecting communities in Norfolk and Newport News, Virginia, but then zooms back out to trace this issue to its roots in Appalachia. Nathaniel, you live in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. Can you share about how you became aware of this coal dust issue?
In the Hampton Roads area, there are two different distinct communities that we're focusing on, one being Norfolk and the other is being Newport News. I am from Norfolk, Virginia, a native of that area, grew up there, and I applied for a job with a coalition called New Virginia Majority, and they were focusing on environmental justice. And this was back in 2017. And it was about the coal dust issue that was happening in the Lambert's Point area of Norfolk. And so I began working with them, building their social media campaign and helping just spread awareness and try to find something meaningful to change about the coal dust issue. And at that moment, they were focusing on covering the coal. Now, I had recently moved to Newport News, and I realized the same thing that was happening in Norfolk was happening in Newport News as well. And so that's when I started this project with a dear friend of mine who I was raised with in Norfolk, Malcolm Jones, and me and him are both practitioners and residents with the University of Virginia's Repair Lab. And the Repair Lab's goal is to help focus on environmental justice in predominantly African-American communities and try to build a coalition around these individuals to do meaningful changes around the work of environmental justice, namely in this area, coal dust.
Can you describe these neighborhoods a little bit in Newport News and Norfolk that are near these coal terminals? Like, who are the folks that are being affected by this?
Two distinctly different communities, some very similar traits, but at the same time was why I love them both. Norfolk is, of course, the biggest military hub in the world, the world's largest naval base is in Norfolk. So it's a diverse population in Norfolk. But when you get to the Lambertsport community, it is a predominantly black community, which also has a hub of college students there as well with Old Dominion University. And so you got a lot of young people who are coming in from all over the Commonwealth and all over the nation to this place. But for the most part, the community is a historically black community in Norfolk. And then you have Newport News, which is right across the water. In this area right here, in which the coal terminal sits, is a predominantly black community as well. A lot of poverty as well in the area. A lot of systemic issues are there. I also pastor in this community as well. And so this is something that is near and dear to my heart because I want to see the people who I pastor, who I work alongside, who I live alongside, to be able to thrive and have a meaningful life, and just be able to breathe fresh and clean air.
These communities are dealing with issues involving coal dust blowing off of these ships and trains into their communities. What are the folks there doing to try to address this problem?
There have been petitions signed. There have been yard signs have been put up that says coal dust kills. They are going out and they're protesting. They've been doing it for years. They've protested at the former Norfolk Southern headquarters in Norfolk. They have since moved on to Atlanta. They've written letters. They've contacted their legislators on a national, state, and a local level. They have gone to city council meetings. They have recorded oral histories to the University of Virginia. We've had so many different things that they've been doing because, once again, this is affecting their community. So what we want to do is just make more people aware and hopefully come out with some type of meaningful legislation that can stop the spread of coal dust in our area.
Adrian, how did you get involved with this community effort?
I first met Nathaniel through working with the Repair Lab. I'm the full-time multimedia producer for the Repair Lab, and part of what the Repair Lab does is offers resources to our practitioners and residents who work with us for 1-year duration residency, and we offer them resources like academic access to libraries or different kinds of academic connections and policy research, and also multimedia production around the topic or the issue that they're bringing to us. So I work as a resource for our practitioners and residents and support the work that they're doing with environmental justice storytelling that shows the work that's already been done and also tells about the work that's to come.
How did the idea for the podcast take off?
The idea for the podcast came because podcasts can be really versatile forms of media. Also, my expertise is in sound and audio editing, so it was maybe the best use of my talents, and with the resources at hand, it made sense and it worked for what we were trying to do, which is disseminate the story about coal dust, environmental racism, and Hampton Roads to the rest of the nation and even the rest of the world. Podcasts work really well for that because little segments can be picked up by other media entities, and it's a lot easier to get something broadcast on radio than it is to get something on Netflix. Podcasts also work really well for amplifying and elevating the voices of community members and really allowing them to tell their own stories and speak for themselves around the issues that have been affecting them, sometimes for generations.
So as y'all began to develop this podcast series, you traced the route of these coal cars back up the railroad tracks and to where the coal was produced, including in West Virginia. So what did you find there?
I traced the coal that gets shipped out of Dominion Terminal in Newport News back to about a dozen coal mines, all in southern West Virginia. And I was shocked but not surprised to find a lot of neglect on behalf of the coal companies around a lot of the towns where coal was being extracted from, in terms of failure to reclaim sites that had been extracted and mined from, and the ways that those costs had been displaced back onto the backs of residents in those communities in a way that sort of eerily echoed what was happening in Newport News and Norfolk, with the costs of environmental remediation being displaced and people paying for that through their health and with their lives. In West Virginia in particular, some of the mines and some of the depots where the coal gets moved from the mine onto the train is owned either by CSX, the rail company that ships to Dominion Terminal, or to some other coal giants that own Dominion Terminal associates and parts, people whose names you're probably familiar with, like Peabody Coal or Arch or Alpha Metallurgical Resources. Those companies all have stakes in Dominion Terminal Associates, and not surprisingly, they often own the mines that the coal is coming from.
Are the folks there in West Virginia being affected by blowing coal dust as well?
Yes, and I heard about this from an advocate named Junior Walk who lives in Eunice, West Virginia, who talked about coal dust settling so thick on records on his record player that the record wouldn't play after just sitting out for 24 hours in his home. Coal dust affects people there like it affects people in Hampton Roads, and it's coal dust coming from the same seam in the same mountain that's being moved from one side of the Appalachians to the ocean, and it's coal that really should just have been left in the ground.
So what connections do you see between these communities in Appalachia and in Newport News and Norfolk?
There's historic poverty in both communities, and these people are bearing the brunt of the health disparities that are spread because of coal dust. And so that's one of the main similarities that I see. And then, of course, we're not reaping the benefits monetarily of that being in our communities. The coal is being transported mostly overseas. 2% stays within the country. The rest is going over to other places. And so it's being labored here, it's being pulled here, it's being dumped into our community. And then once that coal dust spreads into our lungs and then we are sick, we're not going to be helped. We're not going to be provided for. We don't have the adequate health care to be sustained. And then these companies who like to pretend to be benevolent and to be green and friendly are not who they say they are. They are cancer-causing agents in a community, and they're doing damage. That is what the similarities I see. Is that we're all being negatively affected and seeing none of the benefits of what they're saying, being the manufacturers of coal dust.
I agree with that. And I would just add that these communities are not being protected by existing regulatory pathways through the EPA or through state environmental departments. The regulations that exist around coal dust right now through the EPA, which recently were strengthened, are still not enough to protect communities in Newport News, Norfolk, or in communities in West Virginia because of the way those regulations work, which is averages that are regional and over every 24 hours. So a regional average may not address a high amount of coal dust concentrated in one place when the rest of the region is not being affected by that dust. Similarly, a 24-hour average doesn't address coal dust that's getting blown really hard for 30 minutes and covering your whole porch in black dust, and then the wind doesn't blow for the rest of the day. That may not be enough to affect the 24-hour average. So the way that the regulations are designed are not addressing the health needs and the lifestyle needs of these communities. And we know that coal dust is more dangerous than other kinds of dust that these regulations are designed to address, because coal dust can contain lead, mercury, arsenic, and cadmium, among other heavy metals that are known to cause cancer and neurological damage and birth defects.
What's next for the folks involved in this struggle to tamp down coal dust in these coastal communities?
We're looking for a few changes here in our area. One of the things that we're trying to do in order to alleviate coal dust within our communities is an ordinance that will either support a coal dome, one that would enclose the coal into a dome so that the coal dust will not be blown into our communities, and or a wind fence that is going to prevent the wind to blow coal dust into the area and once again alleviate coal dust being spread into our communities. Anything is better than sending beside mountains, literal mountains of coal terminals right next door to our playgrounds, to where we have our gardens, where we have our worship facilities. These are places that are supposed to be safe places for us to go and to live freely and breathe freely, and that's what we're fighting and advocating for.
Nathaniel, Adrian, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure.
That was Adrian Wood and Nathaniel Kurtz. Their new podcast, Crosswinds, is available now. The oil company Shell is allegedly underreporting spills of industrial waste at a pipeline feeding its ethane cracker plant in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. That's led the state attorney general to file 13 misdemeanor charges against Shell. The Allegheny Front's Reed Frazier has been following the issue and recently spoke with Kara Holsopple.
Reed, what is the AG saying that Shell did here?
The AG is alleging that Shell and its contractors underreported volumes of spills of drilling mud during construction of the Falcon ethane pipeline. Drilling mud is used to lubricate the drill bit during horizontal drilling, which is a common construction technique used to build pipelines. And one problem with this drilling mud is that it can shoot out in unexpected places during drilling, like through unseen holes or channels underground, and it can get into streams and wetlands. And since it's considered industrial waste, that's a violation of the state's clean water laws. And if the volume of a spill gets above a certain amount, the DEP has to stop work on the pipeline and inspect. The problem, according to the complaint, is that Shell and its contractors routinely undercounted its volumes to just below the threshold for work stoppages. And it costs the company $40,000 a day when work is stopped, but the maximum penalty for these spills was only $10,000 a day. So the AG is alleging the company had no economic incentive to, quote unquote, do the right thing and report the actual spills. Now, Shell's response to this is it's reviewing the charges and that it's cooperated with all federal, state, and local agencies.
How did this investigation even come about?
The state was tipped off by a whistleblower. In 2019, this man who had been working on the pipeline sent in a complaint, and over the course of the next couple of years, the Attorney General's office and the DEP interviewed people who'd worked on the pipeline, including several that had been fired. Some of those who were fired believed they were let go because they were too open and honest about conditions on the pipeline route.
You mentioned these charges are misdemeanors. Why didn't the AG charge Shell with something more serious? Why not a felony?
That's a good question. I posed it to Jamie Colburn. He's a law professor at Penn State. And he said that for felony environmental crime cases, you have to prove intent to break the law. And Colburn said that's very hard to prove.
You have to line up testimony or evidence about the, in this case, the entity and its personnel's knowledge as to each element of the offense. And that's often a long list of elements.
Colburn said one aspect that may have weighed on the prosecution's decision here is the fact that some of the people working on the pipeline believed their actions were generally condoned in underreporting these spills. That's because the company came up with a term called managed release or controlled release. Essentially, if they stationed a vacuum truck right where the mud was like bubbling up to the surface, they didn't count that as an uncontrolled spill. And some workers might have actually thought this was legally allowed. But, one DEP inspector stated that the pipeline construction managers coined this term, even though they knew it was not really a legally defensible concept.
That was the Allegheny Front's Reed Frazier and Carol Holsopple. You can find more of Frazier's reporting on Shell at the Allegheny Front. Appalachia's been looking for ways to reuse former mining land for decades. In some places, industrial sites and prisons have been built on former mountains flattened by the industry. But other projects aim to use agriculture to restore life to these often bleak-looking landscapes. The results have been mixed, but the West Virginia National Guard says it's had success growing apples, with the help of chicken poop. WVPB's Brianna Heaney went to check it out.
A long, winding road, once frequented by coal trucks, leads to the top of what used to be a mountain. At its end are flat fields filled with budding apple trees.
Got about 20,000 apple trees in the ground. It's an experimentation site that we work with the United States Department of Agriculture.
That's Major General Bill Crane. He says this apple orchard started as a barren, abandoned mine site 7 years ago. This is one way the National Guard is taking on climate change and pollution. The Guard has teamed up with scientists from the USDA and WVU to find ways to grow apple trees on land that was previously thought to be somewhat of a wasteland. First, they had to tackle one major problem.
There was absolutely no topsoil.
This is where the chicken poop comes in.
We're bringing chicken manure from the Eastern Panhandle. We bring it here to help make the soil better.
Which Chris Dardick, a scientist with the USDA, says also helps mitigate farming runoff into rivers. He says nitrogen from animal waste has been running into rivers and creating algae blooms, which cause other aquatic life to die.
By pulling that chicken manure out, which is much of it is nitrogen, bringing it out here, out of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and using it to amend the soils for apple production or other crops, that's sort of a really win-win.
Tracy Lesky works with Dardick at the USDA as the research leader for this project. She says the trees absorb another element, carbon.
One of the things that we recognized a few years ago is this opportunity for apple trees to sequester carbon from the atmosphere, carbon dioxide.
Trees take in carbon and store it in their trunks and roots, or deliver it to the ground. The process is known as carbon sequestration and is one tool for fighting climate change. And where the land had carbon removed from the soil in the form of coal, Lesky says the soil can now hold, or sequester, more carbon than the average soil can. But this project isn't only aimed at helping the earth. Melissa Stewart is the director of Patriot Gardens. She hopes this project will also help the mental health of both active and retired service members.
Can agriculture be really a catalyst to some of their healing? Can it be something that brings them peace of mind? Is it something that is a diversion when they come back home from a deployment and maybe have seen some things that they don't want to remember, or they can't have a conversation with somebody to get that out of their mind? Through agriculture, they can come work with their hands in an atmosphere like this.
This is one of many initiatives the National Guard is working on to produce food like peaches, strawberries, and arugula in the state. These projects are aimed at combating food insecurity in West Virginia, where 1 in 7 children experience hunger. Stewart says this is where the farming work takes on a special meaning for service members who are transitioning out of the service.
Being able to take that need to serve and give it purpose as they come out of uniform, being able to illustrate that they're still serving our state as they transition into more of a civilian status by helping grow the food that helps feed our families.
To find out more about Patriot Gardens Apple Orchard and how to get involved, visit our website at wvpublic.org. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Brianna Heaney in Summersville.
North Carolina is unveiling a roadside historical marker that officially acknowledges the 1882 Cowley Tunnel disaster. 19 prisoners were drowned when their boat capsized in a river west of Asheville. The marker also acknowledges a form of de facto slavery used for decades following the Civil War. Black men who were jailed for often minor offenses were conscripted to build railroads and roads across the South. Jay Price at WUNC has more.
The sign will go here, beside the Tuckasegee River in tiny Dillsboro, about 50 miles west of Asheville. The river is tamed today, its water warming in the spring sun as fly fishermen wade and cast. But on December 30th, 1882, it was frigid. The water high from bad weather and snow was on the banks. That morning, a group of black convict laborers climbed onto a flat-bottomed boat to go from their camp across the river to the railroad tunnel they were hacking through a mountain.
And the practice was to prevent them from running away. They would chain them all together.
David Walton, an assistant professor of history and director of global black studies at Western Carolina University, sitting just above the river.
Something startled the convicts, and they started panicking.
They shifted en masse, and their weight capsized the boat. 19 were dragged to the bottom of the river and drowned. Days later, their bodies were buried in unmarked graves, believed to be a short walk from where Walton was sitting. The new historical sign is part of a growing effort in western North Carolina to give the men some measure of their identities back, and to underline a system that essentially extended slavery for decades after the Civil War. Incarcerated laborers will be the title at the top of the sign.
It was a labor crisis after the Civil War, and they used convict leasing as a way to address that labor crisis.
The states of the former Confederacy ginned up laws to boost the number of prisoners.
We had laws commonly referred to as the Black Codes, where they essentially criminalized black people. So they would be arrested and sentenced to hard labor for things like shooting dice in public, smoking cigarettes in public, being outside past dark, being unemployed.
Once convicted, the prisoners could be leased out, as the 19 who drowned were, to the Western North Carolina Railroad. Others were used by plantations, mines, just about any employer that needed cheap labor. Records are sparse, but more than 150 workers are known to have died while working on the Western North Carolina Railroad, and maybe a lot more. Some from accidents, some from illness, some shot while trying to escape.
Some of these individuals are being charged with simple larceny and basically given a death sentence.
Danielle Duffy is guest curator of an exhibit on the Cowie Tunnel disaster. It opens Monday at Western Carolina University's Mountain Heritage Center. Duffy dug through newly opened prison records and other sources. She says a central goal was to emphasize the victims' humanity.
It was taking this local story and trying to make those 19 men place their names, make them individuals.
So their brief biographies will be at the beginning of the exhibit. Those will note that all of those killed weren't men. One was a 15-year-old boy.
Chaz Eason, he was from Martin County. He was 5'2" and weighed 112 pounds when he was arrested for simple larceny.
The prison records concentrate on their physical characteristics, since the state was keenly interested in being able to recapture them if they escaped. But in some cases, she was able to flesh out more of their lives with things like census and marriage records.
We have Alex Adams, who was from Washington County. He was convicted and sentenced for the same simple larceny as his father and his brother.
And all three were sent to the prison labor camp at the tunnel. Alex's father, Gilbert, was apparently a respected member of the Lee's Mill community in Washington County. Duffy found him listed as a witness for several marriages, and there was some suggestion he fought for the Union. And all three were registered to vote, taking advantage of that relatively new right. Duffy wonders about the scene when Alex drowned.
And what that day must have been like for Gilbert and Warren, Alex's brother. Were they there? Were they on the boat? You know, they are wrapped in this brutal, terrible system, and now they've just had to watch the loss of their loved one.
An archaeologist is planning to excavate the site of the camp where the prisoners lived. But Lauren Berg, the Heritage Center's collection manager, says little physical evidence of the convicts' existence remains, except for the 800-foot tunnel itself.
One of the big problems with trying to develop an exhibit was that this was a period of time and an event that people didn't particularly want to remember it at the time. And so there really wasn't anything saved, there wasn't anything documented. We don't have a single photograph of the site when it was working.
So instead of leaning on artifacts, the exhibit will try to convey a sense of the workers' lives by putting visitors in dioramas.
People can kind of step into the experience that these individuals had. Their day-to-day life, like what their living situation was like, and then we also have one that's going to be based on their work site.
The Jackson County NAACP chapter applied for the state sign. A chapter founder, Enrique Gomez, said he hopes it will begin a broader effort to recognize the role of convict laborers and diversity in the state's mountain history.
Us being able to tell this complex quilt of relationships and seeing how they interact can actually help inform and shape the narratives of Appalachia, and also point towards direction in which we can come together as communities.
Many of the tunnel laborers actually came from counties in the east. Since the Heritage Center exhibit is designed to travel, the staff hopes to bring it to some of those communities, places that lost men to the frigid river and to that system that prolonged slavery.
That was Jay Price of WUNC. Ramp season is coming to a close. In West Virginia and much of central Appalachia, ramps tend to show up toward the end of March and then fade away sometime in May. But before the last ramp was picked, producer Bill Lynch followed a friend out for a late harvest at her secret ramp patch.
It's a dry day at the end of April, and I'm in a location that can't be disclosed. Partly this is because we're gathering ramps, and foragers like my friend Jamie keep these places secret. And partly this is because I don't know exactly where we are, except to say somewhere in Kanawha County. Probably. This is my second time gathering ramps. I went out a couple years ago and brought home a shopping bag full of the garlicky smelling things. I cooked some of them with beans and ham, but gave most of them away to whoever would take them. This time I'm just following along with Jamie while she collects some for friends and her mom.
Up that little ridge over. Easier for you to go first or me?
I don't know. From the car, we hike about 15 minutes until we get to the patch. We're not far from the road, and other people have been here before. Sandwich and chip wrappers, plastic cups, and a flattened Monster energy drink litter the ground. The steep hillside seems like a weird place to have a picnic. Jamie tells me she's been foraging for about 10 years. She's self-taught. Ramps are kind of a gateway into the world of finding wild food.
This is one of the easiest things to start foraging with. Before that, I'd pay $20 for a bag at whatever roadside swamp meat I could find.
The ramp patch is huge. Ramps cover the side of the hill in great clumps, but they're not all that easy to get to, particularly if you're carrying a microphone and wearing boots that are made more for hiking to a coffee shop than going out in the woods. So I stand by a tree while Jamie climbs down the side of the hill with a bag and a gardening trowel. She digs out a few bunches here and there and leaves the rest, just taking some of the ramps as being responsible. Jamie wants them to come back. Besides, not all of the ramps are worth taking. The season is coming to an end. So how can you tell when the things are done? Like when they're...
They disappear.
Huh?
They disappear.
They disappear?
They won't be here in 2 weeks. They're just gone. He'll put up a little stick and has these little bulbs on it. And the seeds come in little clusters. I don't know if it's pods of 4 or 6, but they kind of face outward. One little runner up like an onion, you know? And the seeds look much like them. They turn solid black. Casings are tan. I don't see anything that looks like it's got a runner, but see, they're mature. They pretty much wanted to come out of the ground. There was a lot of digging involved in the babies I got at the earlier season. Yeah, they were, we were working to get those up. This time there wasn't anything to it. Give it a little scoop and they just pull from the soil, but the bulbs last time were so tiny compared to. These will be much more strong. More pungent. But do you see also how the leaves are turning yellow? You're getting what looks kind of like brown spot in your houseplants. They're done. They're just getting old. Kind of like things will dry out in your fridge.
Jamie fills up her grocery bag. Then she leads me out of the woods and back to the car. We put the bag in the trunk and then start towards Charleston. I can really smell it now. I'm just driving around, I can smell it.
That's why we're going to stop at the house on the way to dinner and drop them off. We're not doing this.
For Inside Appalachia, I'm Bill Lynch.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Tyler Childers, Sierra Farrell, Bob Thompson, Dinosaur Burps, and Tim Bing. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Jennifer Gorin. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.